Welcome to the Kidnapping Chronicles. I'm Susan Dunn-Cobb, bringing you the latest developments with the child trafficking criminal enterprise. At the moment, no child is safe. The good news is that you and I are going to change that. Our top stories for this March month of 2022 begin with the baby Cyrus Anderson kidnapping in Idaho. This has been a horrific and evil watching it unfold, but at the same time, very exciting. The victims are an extremely close-knit and patriotic, law-abiding family. The grandfather of the kidnapped baby is a pastor and now a political advocate for constitutional rights in America. He has a website, and he immediately and very professionally began to document the unfolding events on freedomman.org/Cyrus. That's 2 M's in Freedom Man. And he's a longtime good friend of a leader and activist currently running for governor of Idaho, Ammon Bundy. 2 days after Diego Rodriguez spoke at an area local town hall meeting, he revealed serious charges in that meeting against the current governor, Little. His 10-month-old grandson was taken at gunpoint by local police. Sadly, children are violently removed every day in all 50 states, but this child was the wrong one to take. As in the case of the Theodoros of Middleton, Connecticut, one of the parents had presence of mind to begin recording the entire event. The grandfather made a phone call, activating a system that is presently in place and continuing to grow exponentially, I might add. It's a system whereby patriots from all over immediately arrive on scene, and these patriots did at the felony arrest outside a restaurant where the young couple had been pulled over. A crowd of them arrived almost at the same time as the many police cars, who were continuing to grow, surrounding the parents that were inside the car. They also began filming as the father was violently arrested, the sister also, and the mother and baby were led into a waiting ambulance where she was then arrested. But they have it all on film. The crowds grew around St. Luke's Hospital and they never left. The crowds also formed around the several states' actors' homes, those who had participated in the actual kidnapping. The lieutenant governor did a Facebook Live stating the governor was refusing to take her calls. She lamented that she was the actual lieutenant governor and she couldn't even get Child Protective Services to take her calls. This was terrible treatment that she was getting in her position. Powerful videos. They're all on freedomman.org site, /Cyrus. That's important. freedomman.org /Cyrus, CYRUS. I followed this closely for a week. The many amazing developments at press conferences that were given by the powerful grandfather. He is a tremendous public speaker, and I cheered him as I was listening and watching these for getting so many facts out to the world. It was so much truth in very little time that he had to learn them. It was a miracle. This went international. You have to see all of this, especially those who want to know how to advocate, how to help those who also had this happen, and especially how to act when it happens to you. This entire website URL should be studied by everyone. I will not share all the many details because I want you to receive the gift Diego Rodriguez gave us. But the end result is the baby was returned within a few days. That has never happened before. Baby Cyrus is still owned by the state and can be retaken at any moment. The nightmare is not over. But Diego is carrying the message all the way to the ends of the earth and intends to organize all parents in a united front to defend anyone who has a CPS visit. Anyone. You must see his recent rally and hear the speakers, but at the end, they invite everyone to join as an advocate and become part of those who show up to record, observe, and protest. When this happened, everyone got involved with this baby. I mean, everyone. While I was snacking on trolls and discus comments, the big guns came in and threw down the gauntlet to Idaho. Frontline doctors did an amazing job of letting it be known to the powers that be that it was on. I want to alert you to the 20 questions the frontline doctors presented to the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare Director Dave Jefferson. There is a link to their website, their .org. I'm posting it in down below. You'll be able to see it. I want you to see these questions. After receiving these questions, the baby was immediately but temporarily returned to the parents, and they still have him. You may need these in the future. The categories of questions that AFLDS presented to the Health and Welfare Department were evidence of abuse, retaliation, safety, transparency, conflict of interest, political targeting, ethnic targeting, and future. Now, these were categories, and there was different questions in each of these categories. Please review how these questions are asked, as you may find you need to understand the reasoning should you ever be facing an adversarial entity who has a team of lawyers to defend their positions. The state builds their case against you, not for you. The money comes for your child needing their services. It is your job to protect your child, and it will be the fight of your life. Do your homework and study. So I am posting many links to the Cyrus case. It is ongoing. It is happening. They just had to go to the hospital last night. They were able to get past that by going to a different hospital, and a miracle. So they're in a war to steal their baby, and probably to protect Governor Little next re-election from Ammon Bundy and the works of Diego Rodriguez. But Diego Rodriguez makes very good points in the rally speech that he gave. It isn't about politics. It's everyone's child. This is happening everywhere, to everyone, in all 50 states, worldwide. But in our United States, this is how it happens. So it's so well documented. That's why this is an amazing case. But I'll move on to number 2. It's also in Idaho. That one's in Boise. This one is a mother who's in hiding. She's a victim of domestic violence. She's refusing to give up her child and turn him over to the sole custody of a man who's previously tried to kill her and her child. Sarah Stanley, a victim of domestic abuse, won't give up her son despite a court order. She's in hiding to protect her 4-year-old son from his father, Gary Lee Jennings, who, by his own choice, has only been with his baby for 5 hours since birth. His own family won't talk to him, and all of his ex-girlfriends are afraid of him. But courts have given sole custody to the father, who has been estranged for 2 years after he abandoned Sarah in a snowstorm, locking her out of her house, taking her car, and emptying her bank account of $1,300. He locked the baby and the wife out of the house. He also purchased a large life insurance policy, $600,000 on just her and $250,000 on his son. And he tried to kill her a few times. Police reports were filed. This abuser, however, is not finished with her. He spent over $500,000 to attorneys and court costs to obtain custody of this child. Apparently has worked because he bought a judge who refused to look at any evidence, and now it would appear the man has successfully purchased a child. The custody order was signed just before the fake court trial to decide custody. Sarah has been the sole provider and primary parent of her son, with no record of abuse, neglect, or accusations of any wrongdoing. She is challenging the unconstitutional actions of the family court and the judge in this case. Louis Arthur, a minister and advocate for human trafficking victims, met Sarah and her boy at her request, and it was during a time of custody exchange. She wanted him to be there when this happened. Louis testified that the day the court took custody from Sarah, she was in compliance with all of the court's wishes. There was a custody exchange in which the father left, but Sarah showed up. There were witnesses that day, including Louis Arthur. Sarah asked for help from Louis Arthur. When it became apparent, the courts ordered River, the boy, to sole custody of his father. Louis said this was the first time he had been involved with hiding a woman and child from the courts. He does this all the time for other women and children regarding border issues. He also stated he will not turn her into authorities. This is a standoff. Francesca Amato stated that family court and CPS is the door, the gateway to child sex trafficking. Children are taken, placed in dangerous situations, and then run away or otherwise disappear. Judges are complacent in part of all of this. She asks us all, if someone ripped away the ones you love more than your own life without a trial, and suddenly, with no reason at all, and threatened their young lives with instant destruction, what would you do? I posted Francesca's YouTube video where she interviews Sarah Stanley and the pastor. And it would be very good to watch this. You can decide for yourself, but this is a standoff. The third story. Twin boys are murdered in a foster adopt home in Bakersfield. Now, this is not just a murder, but the children have disappeared for over 2 years. They've been dead for over 2 years. This is as much a story about the common practice of states refusing to place children in kinship homes, violating federal law every time they do this, and ensuring the damage to the child is much more traumatic than it would ever need to be. The fact that this ended up in the torture murder of very young and beloved boys from an extended family is also way too common. Terrible things happen when the state chooses to place children with strangers. Colin Combacher reports with Law and Crime that Kern County DA's office now believes that Orrin West 4 and Orson West 3 were killed by their foster adoptive parents 3 months before they were reported missing in December 2020. Trezell Philip West, 35, and Jacqueline Gabrielle West, 32, were indicted by a Kern County grand jury after a 3-month-long presentation of evidence, the DA said. They were arrested March 1, 2022, by the Bakersfield Police Department and are being held without bail. Now, Law and Crime previously reported the defendants were charged with 2 counts each of murder in the 2nd degree and willful cruelty to a child. They have also both been charged with 1 count each of false report of an emergency because they called police and said the boys disappeared from the backyard. Their bodies have never been found. More than 50 witnesses testified. Boys reported missing from a California city home they never lived in. And it's alleged that the parents used their other children to hurt the 2 small boys. They had 3 other biological children, I believe, that were also removed. Well, that were removed at the time of the arrest. The biological family of these boys filed a complaint against Kern County. They filed a complaint in Kern County Superior Court alleging that Kern County and Kern County Child Protective Services negligently placed the boys into the custody of their adoptive parents. A summons is listed under Tuesday's Kern County Board of Supervisors agenda, which notes the filing has been referred to the county counsel's office. The county has 30 days to respond to the complaint, which demands a jury trial. Something that no parent gets when their kids are taken. A jury trial. The plaintiffs in the complaint include Charles Pettis, the biological father of Orson 3 and Orrin 4, and Brenda Pettis, the biological grandmother of the boys. I won't continue on with reading all the complaint. But the complaint states the boys were not under the supervision of their biological parents or grandmother when the alleged abuse took place, meaning when CPS took them from their real family. When Brenda Pettis said she could take custody of the children, CPS did not give her the boys, Castillo said. The defendants had a duty to the plaintiffs to investigate the safety of both the Pettis homes, the welfare of the children, and the safety of the environment, but negligently failed when the brothers were taken from the care of any biological family members, the complaint alleges. Okay, so they're seeking damages, anguish, it lists all the things, but it's typical in a complaint. We're just going to do our best to figure out how it happened and to make sure that the agencies are held accountable for how they allowed this to happen to these 2 kids, Castillo said. Many parents who are hearing this can testify all too well that we really do know how this happened, don't we? Reunification or placing children with kin doesn't pay any dollars to the state. I'm posting a links to update on the boys onto what the latest is. The next story is Deputy Avoids Jail Time. No punishment for the guilty would be a better title. Shannon Henderson found this horrific story and it's shared from Oxygen True Crime. A few years back, I posted his arrest. Well, now we get to find out what happens when the conclusion is finally reached from the slow-moving wheels of justice. Jax Miller reports March 4 that a former Shelby County Sheriff's Office deputy, Brian Beck, 47, convicted of raping a 14-year-old girl over a 20-month period of time, will avoid jail time after pleading guilty to a lesser charge. Initially charged with 2 counts of rape by force or coercion and 2 counts of sexual battery by an authority figure back in 2018, he was sentenced to 3 years probation after pleading guilty to a charge of aggravated assault, according to Memphis Fox Channel 13. For the original charges, Beck faced 30 years in prison for each of the 2 rape charges and 15 years for each sexual battery charge, per Tennessee law, for a total of 90 years behind bars. The legal age of consent in the state is 18 years old. The father and the family of the severely traumatized girl are not happy. But after 5 years of waiting for this pedophile's trial, they got something. In contrast, the mugshot of the guilty cop seems quite confident he would receive a good outcome. He belongs to a group of individuals who have power and control over our lives. They are the same ones who remove babies and children from families. When pathological individuals with criminal inclinations get into positions of power, a few always seem to get caught committing their vile acts. Too often, leniency is the outcome of those trials. They have immunity. I am posting his happy mugshot. Next, a former DCYF worker is accused of sending inappropriate pictures to FBI agent who was posing as a teen. According to an FBI affidavit obtained by WMUR News 9 Investigates, investigators allege that Jason Ellis of Derry sent inappropriate photos of himself to someone he thought was a girl under the age of 14. That person was actually an FBI special agent, officials said. In February 2020, Ellis allegedly contacted the agent through Kik. That time, the agent was posing as a 13-year-old girl. Ellis was arrested last week and charged with transfer of obscene material to minors. A federal judge ordered his temporary detention. News 9 has learned that for 17 years, Ellis worked as a juvenile probation and parole officer for DCYF. Ellis had been on suspension for the past 2.5 years. Wonder why. But a spokesperson for DCYF told News 9 that as of Thursday, he is no longer an employee. Well, they finally got around to firing him. Ellis previously served as a temporary part-time youth counselor for the Sununu Youth Services Center from 2011 to 2012. He also worked as a youth counselor at the Youth Development Center for January 2003 to April 2005. News 9 Investigates has learned that Ellis is one of the 400 people named in a lawsuit against Youth Development Center, alleging abuse. He is scheduled to appear in court on the federal charges next month. Now, since these are the ones who make decisions to remove our children or have private access to our children, it's helpful to understand their motivation to do this, right? Let's switch subjects. Texas trans issue. The war is on. Jeff Younger, if you've been following his story, he shares his horrific story of his son's forced transgender sex change beginning at 3 years of age. His son is a few years older now, and he might be 9, I'm not sure, and no longer able to see his father since just some weeks ago. I have been following this story for a long time, and it's unbelievable. It's getting crazier by the day. But Jeff Younger is now running for public office. He's taking the fight into Congress, hopefully as a member of Congress. But now comes the governor of Texas with this story. Texas begins investigation into trans families. I found a very good YouTube video. I'm posting it. The young lady does an excellent job, and I'm taking from her video, March 1, 2022. Oh, actually, this one is written by David Goodman and Amanda Morris. I'll give references if I get them right, and to the credit for credit's due. Texas investigates parents over care for transgender youth, the suit says. The investigations by the state's Department of Family and Protective Services started last week with an employee of the agency, according to the suit, after Governor Greg Abbott called for such inquiries. Governor Greg Abbott directed them last week to handle certain medical treatments as possible crimes. Finally. The order followed a non-binding opinion by the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, that parents who provide their transgender teenagers with puberty-suppressing drugs or other medically accepted treatments, which doctors described as gender-affirming care, could be investigated now for child abuse. Abbott cited an opinion by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. It is already against the law to subject Texas children to a wide variety of elective procedures for gender transitioning, including reassignment surgeries that can cause sterilization, mastectomies, removals of otherwise healthy body parts, and administration of puberty-blocking drugs or supraphysiologic doses of testosterone or estrogen, Abbott wrote. Texas law imposes reporting requirements upon all licensed professionals who have direct contact with children who may be subject to such abuse, including doctors, nurses, and teachers, and provides criminal penalties for failure to report such child abuse, he continued. There are similar reporting requirements and criminal penalties for members of the general public. Let me add, Jeff Younger's ex-wife is a pediatrician, the one who's causing his early transitioning from male to female. Abbott acted from Ken Paxton's opinion that Texas law also imposes a duty on DFPS to investigate the parents of a child who is subjected to these abusive gender transitioning procedures and on other state agencies to investigate licensed facilities where such procedures may occur, hospitals, clinics, doctors, he said. A year ago, bills were killed, HB1399, HB68, and a couple others that would have done all this. But Stephanie Click, a state representative involved, allegedly stated she didn't want to offend the transgender community. It's election time, guys. Good going, Abbott. Among the first to be investigated was an employee of the State Protective Services Agency who has a 16-year-old transgender child. Her employer had her placed on administrative leave last week and had an investigator from the agency visit her seeking medical records related to her child. She is refusing to cooperate. The situation can mean that any parents who help with transitioning their child will be investigated for child abuse and may be classified and put on a registry as child abusers. Since the governor's action, the Texas Tribune talked to 7 families with transgender children who have proactively hired lawyers as a result of this directive. None were willing to give their names, fearing that someone might report them if their identity became known. Shine a light in the darkness, and the darkness runs. And lawyers who specialize in LGBTQ family law say the number of families reaching out in fear of potential child abuse investigation is unlike anything they've ever seen. But a Texas judge is running interference to, drumroll please, stop CPS from removing a child. Wow. Judge temporarily shields family and psychologist from Texas governor's order on transgender care for youth. That's the title of this one. Judge Amy Clark Meacham from Travis County's 201st Civil District Court set a hearing for March 11th at 10 a.m. Central Time to determine whether she should grant a statewide temporary injunction that would prevent the investigation of any reports of people facilitating or providing gender-affirming care to transgender minors solely based on the fact that the minors are transgender. Well, looky there. Abusers have a refuge in our judicial system. The judge takes on the governor. I think we are watching a show. And just when it was getting interesting, right? Come on, Abbott. What have you got to throw back? Find out in next month's Kidnapping Chronicles, April 2022. We'll let this one develop. Here's another trans-related issue. Steve Warren of USCBNnews.com, largest U.S. pediatric hospital, cancels puberty-blocking trans treatments for kids after Texas called it child abuse. Smart on their part. Texas Children's Hospital, located in Houston and also the nation's largest pediatric hospital, has announced it has stopped transgender therapies for kids. It announced that its decision to stop such hormone-related prescription therapies was made after it reviewed Abbott's order. CBN News has reported that some medical centers around the world are taking a second look at how to treat children with gender dysphoria. CBN News has also reported that a growing number of doctors, both in the U.S. and abroad, are questioning claims by their professional medical associations that puberty-blocking drugs are helpful in treating children who are confused about their gender. And right behind that, the FDA. Thousands of deaths associated with drugs given to trans children. Celeste McGovern of the National Catholic Register reported that fatal blood clots, suicidal behavior, lowered IQs, brittle bones, and sterility are just a few of the potential side effects of puberty blockers. Thousands of children attending affirmative gender health clinics globally, including in the United States and the United Kingdom, are being given powerful puberty-blocking drugs with a litany of serious side effects, including death, according to the Food and Drug Administration data. You know, the FDA, those people that we think protect us. The drugs, sometimes referred to as chemical castrators because they are used to treat sex offenders, are increasingly used as a first-line treatment for gender-confused children as young as 10 years old when they are referred to counseling. Frequently, on their first consultation, children and teens are implanted with hormone blocker-releasing rods or taught to self-inject the drugs to pause their adolescence and prevent developmental changes like growth of breasts and facial hair while they decide on which sex they would like to identify. The Food and Drug Administration has not licensed the drugs for transgender medicine due to lack of supportive evidence. They are approved for treating prostate cancer and uterine pain in adults. But the agency has recorded more than 41,000 adverse events of their use between 2013 and 2019. More than 26,000 of the events associated with the two hormone blockers, leuprolide acetate and triptorelin, which includes Lupron and similar drugs used by clinics, were classified by the federal agency as serious, including 6,370 deaths. The drugs, which dramatically lower testosterone and estrogen levels in the body, are linked to life-threatening blood clots and other complaints, including brittle bones and joint pain. Now, I am not going to list all the medical things that was included in this article, but I'm leaving the link, and you can browse through it and just see how and in what way scientifically that these drugs do their dirty work on a human body. A former children's court judge was sentenced to 9 years for child porn. The judge was convicted for the worst of the worst child porn and confirms that judges should not be deciding custody. Former family court judge Brett Blom, I hope that's the way you say it, Blomme, was convicted for use and dissemination of extreme and sadistic child pornography. Brett Blom, 39, an openly gay married father of two adopted, had been elected less than a year before he was arrested in March on state child porn charges. In May, he was indicted on 2 federal charges and pleaded guilty in September. Sharing from the Women's Coalition, I'm getting the information from them. Blom was indicted on 7 counts of distributing child pornography and was facing 175 years in prison and a $700,000 fine. But not surprisingly, he received a super sweetheart plea deal. He was sentenced to just 9 years in prison and a $5,000 fine, and he likely will get out early. Each of the children involved in every video and image he viewed and shared over many years, likely in the thousands, suffered incredible pain and terror, robbed of their innocence, and they will most likely suffer some long-term mental, emotional, and physical problems because of the abuse. But this vile child perpetrator only has to serve 9 years or less, probably in some upscale prison for white-collar criminals, protected from the rest of the population. Unbelievably, at the sentencing, a fellow judge of Blom's was allowed to make a victim's impact statement for the state, lamenting the tarnishing of the judicial system and the $50,000 it had cost for replacement judges. Typical judge. No sympathy for the real victims. Moral of this story? The moral of this story is that a judge should not have the power to decide custody of children. Blom's horrific criminality and sociopathy provide yet another example of why. Also, gay judges should not be allowed to adopt children. Consider that one too. U.S. founding fathers recognized the danger in entrusting fallible, untrustworthy, corruptible judges with important decisions. I consider trial by jury as the only anchor ever yet imagined by man by which government can be held to the principles of its Constitution, Thomas Jefferson said in 1788. Back then, they had jury nullification. I think they might have taken that away, which was another caveat, which made it even better. But we don't have that when your children are taken away. The 7th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution provides for any civil case worth more than $20, about $650 today, to be heard by a jury. Inarguably, our children's safety and well-being is more than a few $100. In suits at common law where the value and controversy shall exceed, let's say, $650, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. 7th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Deciding custody is arguably the most important ruling that is made in a court of law. And let me say one thing about that. The amendments in the state constitutions are even stronger than the U.S. Constitution. Just remember that. Important point. So look up what you have in your state. Which child custody does not use your Constitution. The fallout from bad rulings can endanger children and result in abundant emotional pain, financial devastation, child development disruption, estrangement, mental health disorders, and loss of human potential. Therefore, a new system where judges like Blom do not have the power to decide custody is necessary. I'm posting links. Madison, Wisconsin, Bruce Ville-Mette of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel had a little bit to say about Judge Blom. He was quite favorable to Blom, so I'm just sharing just a few things. U.S. District Judge James Peterson cited several aggravating factors in the case. One was the nature of the pornography. He called it sadistic treatment of toddlers, extreme victimization, and the worst of the worst. Peterson also said he couldn't ignore the fact Blom was a sitting judge when he shared such images. Peterson noted that no matter of objective quality of Blom's work on the bench, his crime will not make every family that appeared before him have doubts about his decisions. You think? In seeking the 12.5-year sentence, prosecutors called Blom unequivocally a danger to the community and cited his text messages expressing interest in sex with minors. This is not viewing pornography. This is something different. The case began with a tip from the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which tracks child pornography. He targeted children online, talked with people who had the same desires, and considered different ways to gain access to potential victims. The government sentencing memo reads, he wants the serious help he needs for his porn addiction with its underlying root causes and for his alcohol abuse, Van Wagner wrote in a sentencing memo. It grows, right? Keeps adding. The couple has 2 adopted children who were not part of any illegal images. No, who needs to take pictures? You got them in your mercy at home. Blom's sentencing memo indicated he has remained in contact via daily video chats from jail, and these children were not removed from the home. Not. They're still there. He began service as a judge in August 2020 in children's court in Wauwatosa. As soon as he was arrested in March, the Wisconsin Supreme Court suspended him without pay on the grounds that he was unable to properly discharge his official duties. He was free on conditions until federal indictment in May, and since then, he's been in jail. But since he was not given any notice or process, Blom is filing suit to seek for the withheld pay until his formal resignation in September, and he earns $147,535 annually. All the audacity. All right, next one. Police rapist. This comes through Catherine Wang Anderson, who shared it from dailymail.com news, written by Adam Mano, March 11th. A former small-town Pennsylvania police chief, Brent Robert Getz, 30, has been convicted of raping a child in a case that has languished for years after the victim first came forward in 2012. After his 2019 arrest, Getz was fired from his job as police chief in Weisport, a town of 413 people. Getz was found guilty of raping a child hundreds of times when she was 6 years old and continuing until she was 11, with help from a friend. The girl first told her elementary school substitute teacher that Gregory E. Wagner, Jr., 31, had raped her. That abuse began when she was 4 and when Wagner was 14. Getz joined in 2 years later when she was 6 and he was 16, prosecutors say. Getz and his friend would also allegedly force her to watch pornography. She said it happened hundreds of times, several times a week, until she was 11. At one point, she recorded a video of Wagner forcing her to watch pornography. She took a video of them forcing her to force her to watch pornography because nobody would believe her. Nobody. This poor kid. Police revisited the case in 2018, and that's when the victim revealed that Getz, Wagner's friend, had also participated. Wagner later implicated Getz. So, Getz was going to get away with it. This kid just wouldn't give up. God bless her. In addition to the rape count, the jury found Getz of Lehighton guilty Thursday of 1 count each of involuntary, deviant sexual intercourse with a child, aggravated indecent assault of a child, and indecent assault of a child under 12. His bail was immediately revoked and he was taken to jail. He has not yet been sentenced. Don't hold your breath, guys. This next one, foster adopt gays hurting children. This story comes from Lima, Ohio News by Jay Swigart, March 11th. Scott Steffes, 40, of Lima, was sentenced Thursday to 47 years in prison on charges of felonious assault and sexual battery against 5 young boys, some of whom were foster children placed in his home. He participated along with his domestic partner, Jeremy Kindle, in the sexual abuse of foster children in his care over a span of 4 years. Steffes was sentenced by Allen County Court Judge Jeffrey Reed as a result of his guilty pleas earlier this year to 16 felony charges related to sex crimes committed against 5 separate underage victims. On January 27th, Steffes entered guilty pleas to 5 counts of felonious assault, second-degree felonies, and 11 counts of sexual battery, felonies of the third degree. In return for those pleas, prosecutors dismissed 46 additional counts against Steffes, including 2 counts of rape. Steffes was classified as a Tier 3 sex offender and must register with local authorities every 90 days for life. In July of 2018, Steffes and his domestic partner, Jeremy Kindle, were foster parents and adopted 3 boys, ages 3 through 8, with the help of Allen County Children's Services. The men already had legal custody of 3 boys between the ages of 14 and 17 at the time. Kindle, 37, was indicted on 65 sex-related counts after prosecutors alleged the 2 men had engaged in sexual conduct with foster children in their care over a series of incidents that took place between 2016 and 2020. He pleaded guilty to 20 counts of felonious assault, sexual battery, unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, and tampering with evidence, and he was sentenced earlier this year to 94 years in prison. Here is the coup de grace, though. Are you ready for this? Both Steffes and Kindle were infected with the virus that causes AIDS at the time of the sexual assaults, according to court documents. Sorry, kids. The state made you into Title IV orphans for this. Your mama would never let you around men like this, but highly educated social workers and judges thought it would be a great idea. But there is another story to this one. The arrest of Steffes and Kindle also led to the termination of Cynthia Scanlon as the executive director of the Allen County Children's Services. Scanlon currently faces felony charges of tampering with records and obstructing official business and a misdemeanor count of dereliction of duty connected with the sexual abuse incidents. A jury trial has been scheduled for October 17th in Scanlon's case. I'll be sure to watch for that one. It's on my birthday. Happy birthday to me. The next one. Wilmington cop indicted for alleged nude, lewd text with a teen in foster care. Catherine Wang Anderson found this and shared it from WHYY NPR by Chris Barish, March 15, 2022. A Wilmington cop was indicted for alleged nude, lewd text with teen in foster care. When Delaware Child Protective investigators responded to a 17-year-old foster child's complaint of being sexually abused in December, the girl recanted her claim after Wilmington police officer Brandon Cooper was also dispatched to her home. It's more than one. This girl was calling on one, and then the cop that was doing it to her showed up. Cooper, 30, is accused of sending lewd messages, photos, and videos to the girl, who was listed in his contacts as YOUGN, a misspelling of young one, court records show. Sources familiar with the investigation said it was merely a coincidence that Cooper was dispatched to interview her about the allegation against a different unidentified man. But the previous day, as the girl later showed investigators, Cooper allegedly sent her a video in which he wore his police uniform, told her to look, and then aimed the camera downward as he exposed himself. The investigation into Cooper culminated this week when a grand jury indicted him for felony sexual solicitation of a child, along with misdemeanor lewdness and official misconduct. If convicted of all 3 counts, Cooper faces 2 to 26.5 years in prison. What a wide variety. Cooper had met the girl in March 2020 when she was 15 years old, while he was on duty at Kingswood Community Center in northeast Wilmington, the indictment said. Let's do something different. LA juveniles. Richard Winton of the Los Angeles Times reports that at least 20 women say they were sexually assaulted over the course of a dozen years at Camp Scott, Los Angeles County's all-girls juvenile detention facility, according to a lawsuit filed Wednesday. The women allege a culture of abuse at the Santa Clarita Valley military-style boot camp, where no fewer than 10 staff members subjected them to repeated sexual assault. The incidents occurred between 1996 and 2008, according to the lawsuit filed in Los Angeles County Superior Court. Details of the incidents were published in the Times, but I won't share them at this time, and I do give you the link. The perpetrator, if you want to read that stuff, you're more than welcome. The perpetrators used this position of trust and authority to repeatedly sexually abuse juvenile females in their custody, care, control, and direction, the lawsuit states. Joe Kaplan, a former commissioner on the County Probation Oversight Committee and lawyer with extensive juvenile court experience, said that although she was not aware of the alleged abuse at Camp Scott, there were regular disciplinary system problems that led to mistreatment of minors at the camp. It does not surprise me. The conditions were horrible, Kaplan said. The probation department heads at the time allowed children's lives to be ruined every day. Akilah Jefferson, 38, said she was 16 when she entered Camp Scott a second time, and Deputy Probation Officer Thomas Jackson began grooming her for sexual favors, slipping her toiletries, including soaps and lotions her grandmother couldn't get to her. She said sexual relationships at the camp were common, and officers claimed girls like property. Other girls were with other probation officers, Jefferson said. It's not really a secret what's going on. Everybody's talking about it. The camp staff, made up of deputy probation officers, controlled every aspect of the girls' lives and could cut off mail or visitations as well as decide punishments, including a day or more in the box, a solitary confinement unit. These young girls were treated as sexual property by the very people meant to protect them, said attorney John Manley, whose prior litigation helped expose pedophile priests as well as the sexual abuse by USA Gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar and physicians at USC and UCLA. We have law enforcement officers trading girls and raiding them, and one even ended up pregnant. Let me just say this one thing. Imagine this. You're a pedophile. You want a job where beautiful young girls can be handcuffed by you and be under your total power and control, where no one can see them and there's nothing they can do about it and they can't even tell. Let's see. What kind of job? Oh, I know. Oh, wait a minute. The Times article continues in detail describing the tortures in graphic detail of these girls over a period of years. They were literal sex slaves of monsters who wore a badge. I will not read these, but I will post the link if you choose to do so. This next story, this next travesty, is similar to the last one in many ways. You will be quite surprised how these things are handled. Or maybe you won't, but here we go. Rescued juveniles trafficked by state employees at the next shelter. KENS Channel 5 Texas News reported foster girls were sex trafficked at a state shelter after being rescued from sex trafficking. Reading from the original report from the authors David Lynch of the Texas Tribune and Reese Oxner of KNS Channel 5. Employees of a Texas contracted facility, because all these places are private corporations, and they're registered on Dun and Bradstreet. You can buy stock in these corporations. They make good. But back to where I was. Texas contracted facility meant to care for female foster children who are victims of sex trafficking were discovered to be trafficking the same children, according to a federal judge. 7 children ages 11 to 17 were victimized by 9 alleged perpetrators, according to discussions held during an emergency court hearing called by U.S. District Judge Janice Jack on Thursday. The children remained in the facility for over a month after the abuse was first reported before they were removed. The children were sexually and physically abused and suffered from neglectful supervision and medical neglect while at the Refuge, a facility located in Bastrop, contracted by the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. A current Refuge employee reported to state authorities on January 24th, so they're whistleblowing. The court and the court monitors, watchdogs of the foster care system appointed by the judge, were not notified until Thursday. That employee said a former staff member sold nude photos of 2 children in the facility's care, using the proceeds to purchase illegal drugs and alcohol that were then supplied to the children, according to a letter from DFPS filed on Thursday notifying the court about the incident. Local law enforcement and the Texas Department of Public Safety were immediately notified, according to the letter. The identities of the suspects have not yet been made public. Rich Richmond, DFPS Associate Commissioner for Child Protective Investigation, told the court the children weren't immediately removed from the facility because investigators thought the person responsible had been fired. However, several staff members were found to be allegedly responsible for the abuse of the children, some of whom were not immediately removed. A suspect has been arrested by law enforcement, and DFPS anticipates further arrests will be made. In the meantime, a spokesperson for the Refuge confirmed an employee was terminated after staff found out they had allegedly coerced the residents into creating commercially sexual exploitation material. For now, all children at the Refuge have been transferred into alternative care while an investigation continues. We are fully cooperating with authorities and we hope the alleged perpetrator will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and we will assist the sheriff and the Bastrop County District Attorney's Office in their prosecution. The facility statement goes on to read. Because this is an ongoing investigation, and especially because we want to protect the confidentiality of the minors in our care, there are specific details we cannot share. Between the first report on January 24th and March 4, January, February, March, DFPS received several additional reports about the staff member who was removed from the facility. However, during the investigation, DFPS discovered several additional staff members still employed at the operation appeared to be involved, and that many of them were related to one another by blood or marriage and or were cohabitating, according to the letter. The operations residential, it's all in the family, guys. The operations residential care director is now believed to have known about the sexual abuse. DFPS did not remove all of the children until Wednesday, 5 weeks after the first documented report of sexual abuse. The department sent Child Protective Services staff and off-duty law enforcement to the facility to ensure the youth's safety a day prior. 8 of the 9 children who were in the refuge at the time had been placed with other facilities that specialize in serving victims of commercial sex trafficking. I bet they do. According to the letter, the remaining child refused to be placed in another facility, and DFPS is searching for another placement. Okay, the judge expresses horror at the discovery during the hearing. She blasts DFPS for not immediately removing the kids when it was first reported, calling it another failure. DFPS did not immediately respond to that or comment. The judge instructed the state to provide the court with the identities of the abusers and victims by noon on Friday. Sounds like a showdown. She also asked for details on the care the children have received since they were removed. But now for the good part. And now for the rest of the story. Or maybe I should say the second and biggest story. March 16th. This was posted in the same exact paper as an update by the same authors. Since the story below was published, there has been a major update in this case. Texas Department of Public Safety Director Steve McCraw wrote in a letter to Governor Greg Abbott that there is no evidence that any of the residents at the refuge shelter have ever been sexually abused or trafficked while at the shelter. Information submitted to and given in federal district court had claimed several girls at the shelter were trafficked by 9 employees. McCraw wrote there was no sexual abuse and no human trafficking. He wrote that the federal court monitor identified material inaccuracies and contained information that had not been properly verified. The link to their cleanup campaign is provided in the original story. You are welcome to read the standard, well, wait, I'll just read it so you'll know how this is done. Refuge founder and CEO Brooke Crowder released the following statement Wednesday. We are deeply relieved by the Texas Rangers' findings reported in today's letter from the Department of Public Safety to Governor Abbott. We are grateful to state leaders for maintaining an intense focus on the issues related to interdicting sex trafficking and supporting us in our efforts to protect and rehabilitate the victims that enter our care. We are committed to continue close cooperation with DPS, the Texas Department of Family Protective Services, and the Bastrop County Sheriff's Office as they pursue justice for the girls involved in the cited incidents. That's how it's done, boys and girls. Next. Georgia Bureau of Investigation arrests owner of Johnson County Disabled Children's Home for cruelty to children. Wrightsville, Georgia, March 2. The GBI has arrested David Fahey, 62, for 4 counts of felony cruelty to children and 3 counts of felony false imprisonment. The arrest comes after a nearly 2-month-long investigation into allegations of abuse of disabled adults and children at King's Cleft, located at 159 Union Grove Church Road, Wrightsville, Johnson County, Georgia. At the beginning of the investigation, 5 children and 5 adults were found at King's Cleft. The children were removed and placed into the custody of the Division of Family and Children's Services. The disabled adults are in the process of being removed by Adult Protective Services. Fahey was arrested at King's Cleft and taken to the Johnson County Detention Center for processing. On Friday, January 21, Johnson County Sheriff Greg Rowland asked the GBI to assist with his investigation into allegations of child abuse and disabled adult abuse at King's Cleft. Kathy Fahey, David Fahey's wife, died during the investigation. She was also a subject of this investigation. A joint investigation remains active and ongoing. If anyone has information about this, please contact the GBI Regional Investigative Office in Eastman at 478-374-6988 or the Johnson County Sheriff's Office at 478-864-3941. Anonymous tips can also be submitted by calling 1-800-597-TIPS. California authorities raid 3 preschools to enforce mask mandates separating children from adults. Regulators arrived at all 3 of Aspen Leaf's facilities, saw the maskless children, conducted the interviews, and issued a Type A citation. This comes from the Ari Hoffman Show of Seattle, Washington. He writes in American News PM. I'll leave the links. A state agency in California allegedly conducted mask raids on a preschool and interviewed children alone, preschool children, without parental consent. According to parents, the 3 locations of the Aspen Leaf Preschool in San Diego were simultaneously raided in January. This after the school was forthright and clear with parents and regulators about their decision to not mask the young students in their care. The Voice of San Diego reported that officials separated the preschoolers aged 1 to 4 years old from each other and the adults at the locations to question the children about the school's masking policies. In their decision to not mask the preschoolers, Aspen Leaf's owners believed that since the preschoolers would not be masked while eating or sleeping, there was no point masking them for the rest of the time either. The owners also felt that the mask would hinder the children's development. The California Department of Social Services is responsible for overseeing compliance in preschools. Though regulators legally have the authority to isolate and interview, children's parents at Aspen Leaf stated in a complaint that they believed that should only be done in extreme cases such as alleged child abuse. According to The Voice, Kevin Gaines, Deputy Director of Child Care Licensing, wrote to one Aspen Leaf parent who lodged a complaint that regulators determined that the interviews were conducted in an appropriate manner and were a necessary component of the required complaint investigation. He added that staff are trained to conduct interviews with children in a manner that avoids causing undue stress, and that Aspen Leaf adult staff were in the line of sight of each child during interviews. Oh, that helps a lot, don't it? However, the Child Care Licensing Department was not the agency that issued regulations on masks. Rather, the California Department of Public Health issued the mask requirement. According to The Voice, owners claim that if the state's health department tried to enforce the mask mandate, Aspen Leaf would have complied or considered if they had any recourse to fight it. According to the owners, Regulators inspected Aspen Leaf facilities twice in December and observed that the children were not masked, but knew of the company's no mask policy. No citations were issued after the visit, nor was it noted in the report that the children were maskless. However, the owners did receive an email several days later stating that the children were required to wear masks. Following a parent complaint in January during the Omicron surge to the licensing authority, an investigator called the owners and asked him to enforce the mandate, at which time he argued that regulators did not have the authority to enforce the mandate. According to The Voice, several days later, regulators arrived at all three of Aspen Leaf's facilities, saw the maskless children, conducted the interviews, and issued a Type A citation. Aspen Leaf reversed its policy to avoid potentially being shut down until March 11, when California's mask requirement for child care centers ends. So just when you thought it was safe to put your kids in daycare, right? Former Beaverton Mayor Dennis Doyle charged with possessing child pornography, officials say. March 4th, Cale Williams of the Oregonian writes, former Beaverton Mayor Denny Doyle has been charged with possessing child pornography, federal prosecutors announced Friday. A criminal information filed in court alleges Doyle possessed digital material containing child pornography, including images depicting minors under 12, between November 2014 and continuing through December 2015. A two-day trial is scheduled for May 10. If convicted of the charge, he could face up to 20 years in prison and up to a $250,000 fine. If convicted, federal authorities will seek the forfeiture of at least one purple 64 GB Lexar USB thumb drive, according to court records. I thought it was a car at first. No, it's not a car. I don't think guy has too much to worry about, really. Doyle, 73, served as a Beaverton councilor for more than a decade before he was elected mayor in 2008. He served 3 terms in the city's top elected position, relinquishing the job in 2020 after he was beaten in a runoff election. In 2008, Doyle was named Citizen of the Year by the Boy Scouts of America. Then, recognized for his long-time community service and long-time work with youth and youth sports. Okay, some good news. Time for some good news, right? Finally. Terry Goodwin shared on her Facebook that the Arizona House passed HB2675 Trial by Jury for Parent-Child Relationships. This is very good news, and now the bill is on to the Senate. What is terrible about this is we already have the constitutional right to trial by jury, boys and girls. Perhaps I'm missing something here. But congratulations to Arizona. Now the rest of you states got to do the same thing, it seems. Catherine Wang Anderson of Stolen, Sold, Slaughtered in Nebraska and Every State of America Facebook group posted this from CBS News Chicago. A retired Cook County judge was among more than 100 people arrested in Florida, including alleged child sexual predators and those seeking prostitutes, in a 6-day undercover human trafficking operation in Florida. Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd said Daniel Peters, 66, told detectives that he used to be a judge in the Cook County 4th Sub-Circuit Court and a special assistant for legal affairs in the Office of Professional Regulations at the Cook County Sheriff's Office in Illinois. Explains a lot. He was charged with soliciting a prostitute. A total of 108 people were arrested in the undercover operation, including 4 Disney employees. The arrest of a human trafficker and 4 child predators alone makes this whole operation worthwhile, Judge said. Where there is prostitution, there is exploitation, disease, dysfunction, and broken families. Officials identified 4 Disney employees as among those arrested. Xavier Jackson, 27, worked as a lifeguard at the Polynesian Resort for Walt Disney. Judd said Jackson sent inappropriate photos of himself and messages to an undercover detective who pretended to be a 14-year-old girl. He was charged with 3 counts of transmitting harmful material to a minor and 1 count of unlawful communication. We protected some little girl someplace that was groomed or potentially groomed by these evil, deviant criminals. Thugs, that's all they are, Judd said about the 4 suspects at a press conference. They're dangerous people. The 3 others who were allegedly attempting to solicit a prostitute were identified by Judge as Wilkeson Fidel, 24, who worked at the Cosmic Restaurant at Walt Disney World's Tomorrowland for 4 years. Shubhan Malave, 27, who is on a visa citizenship from India and worked as a software developer for Disney. And Ralph Leese, 45, who spent nearly 4 years working in IT for Disney. Okay, this one's a pastor. March 21, Tampa, Florida. Robert Pandolfino of WFLA reports that a Tampa pastor, who is also a foster parent, has been accused of the sexual molestation of multiple children. Tampa police say 81-year-old Jesus Manuel Castellano Mojica was arrested this week after an investigation that started last month. According to police, the Department of Children and Families received a report on February 14 about a possible 7-year-old victim of sexual abuse. The Tampa Police Department Special Victims Unit was assigned to investigate. After multiple interviews, detectives say they determined there were 3 victims total. According to police, the victims were 2 young girls and a woman. The woman told police about incidents that happened with the suspect when she was 11, according to detectives. Police say Castellano Mojica is a foster parent and is also a pastor at Grace Church of the Nazarene in Tampa. He was arrested and charged with lewd and lascivious molestation as well as sexual battery. The investigation is ongoing. Okay, this comes to me from Shannon Henderson, a truly amazing story that hopefully can wake up a sleepy nation, much like Delilah in the Bible when she cried out, "The Philistines be upon us! Samson, do something!" Shannon asked, when do we call it an organized ring, ran and defended by the state of Arizona? Court TV posted March 29th. Civilian Army leader led child porn ring. We risked U.S. security. We don't care about your kids. Maybe we'll get you to care about the country, okay? By Michael Resendez, Associated Press. Sierra Vista, Arizona. David Frodsham was a top civilian commander at a U.S. airbase in Afghanistan when he jokingly asked an IT technician for access to YouPorn, the video sharing pornographic website. During his time in the war zone, Frodsham told one woman that he hired her because he wanted to be surrounded by pretty women and routinely called others honey, babe, and cougar before he was ordered home after the military verified multiple allegations of sexual harassment. He's now serving a 17-year sentence. Let's see. Let me get this right. This undated photo was made available by the Arizona Department of Corrections. It shows him after he pleaded guilty to sex abuse charges in 2016 and is serving a 17-year sentence. But records reviewed by the AP showed that the U.S. Army and the state of Arizona missed or ignored multiple red flags over more than a decade, which allowed Frodsham to allegedly abuse his adopted son and other children for years, all the while putting national security at risk. Okay, so this is actually the real story, because these grown adopted boys are suing the state now. So that's what I'm going to get into that. I would not recommend placing him back into a position of authority, but rather pursuing disciplinary actions at his home station, wrote one commanding officer when recommending that the Army order Frodsham to leave his post at Bagram Airfield and return to Fort Huachuca, a major Army installation in Arizona. Probably not saying these right. According to a U.S. Army investigative file obtained by the AP, Associated Press. But when Frodsham returned to his home station in fall 2015, he rejoined the Network Enterprise Technology Command, the Army's information technology service provider, where he had served as Director of Personnel for a global command of 15,000 soldiers and civilians, according to his Army resume. By spring of the following year, he was arrested in Arizona for leading a child sex abuse ring that included an Army sergeant who was posting child porn to the internet. Among the victims was one of Frodsham's adopted sons. Frodsham pleaded guilty to sex abuse charges in 2016 and is serving a 17-year sentence. But records reviewed by the AP show that the U.S. Army and the state of Arizona missed or ignored multiple red flags over more than a decade, which allowed Frodsham to allegedly abuse his adopted son and other children for years, all the while I think I'm doubling up here. The state permitted Frodsham and his wife Barbara to foster, adopt, and retain custody of their many children despite nearly 20 complaints and attempted complaints of abuse, neglect, maltreatment, and licensing violations. Meanwhile, the Army gave Frodsham security clearances and sensitive jobs at a time when his illicit sexual practices made him vulnerable to blackmail. He would have been an obvious target of foreign intelligence services because of his role and his location, said Frank Figliuzzi, the former assistant director of counterintelligence for the FBI. Fort Huachuca is one of the more sensitive installations in the continental United States. It must be, because I never heard of that name. That's pretty interesting. People with security issues should not be there. In addition to NetCom, where Frodsham worked, Fort Huachuca is home to the Army's Intelligence and Security Command, according to its website. Public relations officials at Fort Huachuca confirmed that Frodsham was a program manager for NetCom before he was arrested on child sex abuse charges. They declined to say whether Frodsham was disciplined after returning from Afghanistan or whether the Army ever considered him a security risk. Frodsham, former Sergeant Randall Bischok, and a third man not associated with the Army are all serving prison terms for the roles they played in the child sex abuse ring. But the investigation is continuing because Sierra Vista police believe additional men took part. Now the criminal investigation is spilling over into the civil court, where two of Frodsham's adopted sons have filed separate lawsuits against the state for licensing David and Barbara Frodsham as foster parents in a home where they say they were physically and sexually abused throughout their lives. A third adopted son is expected to file suit Tuesday, and that actually did happen. I don't have the update on that, but I read it today. It's filed in Arizona State Court in Cochise County, said attorney Lynn Cadigan, who represents all three. In the latest complaint, 19-year-old Trevor Frodsham says caseworkers missed or overlooked numerous signs that David and Barbara Frodsham were unfit parents. These included a 2002 sex abuse complaint filed with local police by one of the Frodsham's biological daughters against an older biological brother, and the fact that David and Barbara Frodsham were themselves victims of child sex abuse. Trevor's allegations echo those featured in an earlier lawsuit filed by his older biological brother, Ryan Frodsham, and one filed by Neil Taylor, both of whom were also adopted into the Frodsham household. In an interview with the AP, Ryan Frodsham said his adopted father began sexually abusing him when he was 9 or 10 years old, and the abuse continued into his teens, when David Frodsham began offering his son sexual services to other men. Makes me throw up thinking about it, Ryan said. In the lawsuit, Ryan Frodsham said the state was informed that David and Barbara Frodsham were physically abusing their children by slapping them in the face, pinching them, hitting them with a wooden spoon, putting hot sauce in their mouths, pulling them by the hair, bending their fingers back to inflict pain, forcing them to hold cans with their arms extended for long periods of time, and refusing to let them use a bathroom unless the door remained open. In his AP interview, Ryan said Barbara never sexually abused him, but walked into the room where David was abusing him at least twice. She knew what was going on, he said. The two lawsuits already filed by the adopted sons and related legal filings also say investigators with the Department of Child Safety and caseworkers with Catholic Community Services, which subcontracts foster and adoption work from the state, failed to effectively follow up on 19 complaints and attempted complaints regarding the Frodsham home spanning more than a decade. The complaints began in listen to what they didn't follow up on or do anything about. This is a foster home, an adoptive home. The complaints began in 2002 when the Frodshams applied for their foster care license and continued until 2015, when David Frodsham was charged with disorderly conduct and driving drunk with children in his car, prompting the state to finally suspend their license indefinitely and remove all foster children from their home, although the charges were later dismissed. Okay, 5 months later, the Army deployed Frodsham to Afghanistan, where he was ordered back to Arizona after only 4 months of service. Reports fell on deaf ears. The lawsuits say the Frodshams' adopted children attempted to report their own physical and sexual abuse without success. You need to know this happens all the time. I mean, this is making a big case, but I read about this all the time. That once children are in foster care or in adoptive care, then if they report anything, they're ignored. For instance, Neil Taylor's lawsuit says he attempted to report that David Frodsham was sexually abusing him in 2 phone calls to his case manager, both of which he placed from school. Okay, guess what happened to him? The first time, the case manager reported the call to Neil's adoptive mother, who interrogated him and proceeded to punish him, according to his lawsuit. The second time, the case manager refused to meet with him unless he disclosed the reason for his call over the phone, because he would have had to drive 90 minutes from Tucson to Sierra Vista for a private meeting. It doesn't take kids long to learn. It does no good. And I've read stories where the adoptive and foster parents will tell the kid, you know, the state has a $10,000 life insurance policy on you. You can disappear. But back to this one. Ryan Frodsham's lawsuit and the related legal filings say he reported repeated alleged physical abuse by Barbara Frodsham to Sierra Vista police when he was 12 years old after running away from home. Police photographed several bruises, returned him to Barbara Frodsham, and reported the incident to the State Department of Child Safety. Despite the photographs and a police report, a caseworker who met with Ryan 5 weeks later found his allegations, drumroll please, unsubstantiated. Kids learn. They actually learn to run away really well, get better at it. There's always another pedophile that will take them in. Arizona Department of Child Safety spokesman Darren Daronco declined to answer specific questions about the lawsuits. He instead sent an email outlining the state's procedures for screening prospective foster and adoptive parents. I won't bother you with this nonsense. Yes, they have a disclaimer they send out. They have stuff they give the public, carefully been read over by their attorneys. Okay, it's nonsense. The fraud sham child sex abuse ring is part of a cluster of sex abuse cases that have come to light in Cochise County, Arizona over the last several years, including several involving U.S. Border Patrol agents, 2 of whom worked at the Naco, Arizona border crossing. Among them, okay, I'm not going to read this. It's a list of people. But the story really was, I think, really is what foster kids and adoptive kids, the horror they actually go through. You need to understand, we need to do something to stop this system for their sake, because it doesn't do them any good to cry for help. No good at all. Francesca Amato brings us a great video where she takes on Dr. Nathanson. Usually she takes on a judge, but there are many players in the game of state kidnapping under color of law. In this link, she interviews many parent victims who present invaluable information to all of us so that we can know exactly what we face in the days we live in. And I am just bringing you the YouTube link. They ate this guy for breakfast. I'm telling you, it was a great YouTube video. You got to see it. You're going to find out what happens when you have to appear to a state interview to see if you're nuts or not. It's going to make you nuts just hearing this stuff. And they work for the state, the ones who have to declare you insane. I was going to remember last month. Remember, Melissa Deagle had 5 good reports from psychological testing. They finally found one to say she was nuts and threw her into jail to be force medicated until she had a change of heart about being her own attorney. It's just an amazing story, last month's story. And then attorneys got her out, friends got her out of that, a good attorney, and they found another doctor and he said, no, she's not nuts. She can still be her own attorney. She can still represent herself, but now she has a team of lawyers helping her, so all works out for good. So this is protest from Hollywood and Vine to the LA DCFS building. We don't play, states the lawsuit filed in Los Angeles County Superior Court. It comes from Advocate TV. It highlights the truth that many parents are out faithfully protesting in their desperate attempt to let the public know that children are being stolen and not returned. Advocate TV filmed parents loudly protesting out on Hollywood and Vine and then to the LA DCFS building. I post their YouTube video to give them the last word today. Keep protesting. Keep sharing the truth. Nearly 500,000 parents will lose their children this year. October is the cutoff for the quotas to be reached in order for Title IV dollars to continue to each of the states. We are sounding the warning cry. Join us.